use that too. I have to get up.
I will invite another ally to come and speak, but before I do that, I would like to also acknowledge that we are on a site that has been used for the enslavement of African ancestors and for that of people of indigenous descent. And acknowledging that, we must also acknowledge the relationship that indigenous Black folks have had for thousands of years prior to the contact of European settlers. And also acknowledging that many of us have ancestors who come from cultures of trauma, whose ancestors would have experienced genocide and colonialism, much like the indigenous people who then we have all settled on. And it is our responsibility to recognize and be aware of the privilege that we have and have to honor those people who came before us, like Matthew da Costa and many before him as well. So my name is Quentin VerCetty, and I am honored to be on the host of this panel. I represent the Black Speculative Arts Movement. I'm one of the founders, and the Black Speculative Arts Movement is about raising a platform to promote and to create partnerships and to create projects and programs to elevate, educate, and evolve the arts as it relates to those who believe in pushing the imagination and representation of Black people. And not just of Black people, but the ideas of how we think about Black people in the present and also in the future and throughout history. And recognizing that this is not separate from each other. And so with that said, we have a very interesting and beautiful, distinguished, and decorated group of panelists. And I would like to ask them, first of all, just speak about some of the work that they have here. They have a plethora of books laid out here, and I would like for them to all each to speak on their work really briefly and how did they come to Afrofuturism. And yeah, maybe start the conversation from there.
Sorry about the coordination. I'm kind of regretting introducing the mic now. My name is Chinelo, and I'm a Nigerian writer and editor. I'm the co-founder of the African Speculative Fiction magazine, Onwualu, and the nonfiction editor for Anathema, which is a magazine for queer people of color, speculative fiction as well. I'm primarily a short story writer. These are some of the volumes that I've appeared in. Been working on that now, but I came to speculative fiction in general just because, I think most of us grew up as weird kids. And when you're a weird kid growing up, you're always looking for where you fit in, and sometimes it's in worlds that don't exist. And I think that I came to speculative fiction through some of the usual suspects. I remember the first time I saw Star Trek on TV in Nigeria, and I was blown away. I mean, this captured my imagination completely. And these were some of the first worlds that I thought about. I read speculative fiction as a child. I didn't realize it was. But coming to Afrofuturism was something a little bit more conscious. I remember growing up, the first stories that I wrote didn't feature any people of color at all, didn't feature any Black people, because it simply wasn't part of my imagination. I really only ever seen one or two examples. I remember Conan the Barbarian and Grace Jones's character in that, and I thought it was the most amazing thing. I've since revised my opinion, having watched it as an adult, but I think she's still amazing, right? And these are the sort of representations that I saw in the media, and coming to Afrofuturism was for me a conscious effort to say, I want to be able to see myself in these worlds. I also want other people who look like me, who come from the backgrounds that I come from, to also see themselves in these worlds. And so in many ways, I started writing Afrofuturism before I actually started reading it. And I don't know if that's like an uncommon thing with others. And it's done my heart so good to see many more African women in particular taking this up and writing in these worlds and creating their worlds. And it's just been, it's been amazing. One of the things that I have been really fortunate to find myself is at the cusp of speculative fiction in Africa, in English-speaking Africa, and see it take on, coming out of this post-colonial literature to something that's been its own absolutely unique thing. And I can talk about that a little bit more, but it's just been, it's blown my mind, because one of the things that I think that Afrofuturism can do is help Black people see themselves in futures that acknowledge that they exist, and futures that acknowledge that things are going to get better. I love Black people, but you guys love your dystopias, and I don't understand why. I'm like, we live in these dystopias, and we're like, it's not that great. So one of the things that I think Afrofuturism has been able to do is allow Black people to see themselves in futures that are positive and nurturing and healthy, and then strive for those futures. I can't tell you how many African scientists and Nigerian scientists credit reading these stories and watching these shows as the reason why they got into the STEM in the first place. It's not just good for science; it's good for it needs good for everybody. So that's kind of where I stand on my history.
I got into speculative fiction rather late. I remember I was in a youth hostel and I had nothing to read, and someone said, "Here, read this," and it was book 2 of the Legends trilogy that the Dragonlance series, the Time of the Twins, the Test of the Twins, the War of the Twins, kind of over twice since I read it. And I was like, the cliffhanger just got me, so I think I read the first and then the third. And I started reading more speculative fiction, and then one day in 1997, I saw a cover of Vampire the Masquerade, and the Assamite clan, there was a black guy on the cover, and that just got me, and I was like, I need to write a book where there's a black vampire who used to be a slave. And I started that book. I haven't finished it, but there is a section of it in the form of a short story that's in American Monsters 2 that got published in December of last year. If I had my wits about me, I would have brought the physical copy here, but I have always seen myself in the future. I come from a family of politicians on both sides. My uncle died last year. He was responsible he was one of the people responsible for forming the constitution of his country, he was the legal advisor for the country until his death. The other one is there's a library foundation house where his law practices on one side and his brother's family practices on the other. So, and that's just one side of my family. On the other side, my mom's father was involved in politics in St. Vincent as well. So I've always known that Black people can be lawyers and doctors, because I was told that maybe you would be a lawyer or a doctor. Maybe you could be a doctor like your uncle. Maybe you could be a lawyer like your other uncle. I went to private schools. I went to best schools in Trinidad. See, the thing about Trinidad is part of the national anthem says where every creed and race finds an equal place. That is not an exaggeration. Everyone finds an equal place in Jinko. That's my little joke that I try to make. So, but I've never really seen anything speculative. Like a lot of the literature comes out from the Caribbean as post-colonial, and we are known for that, like Samuel Selborne, especially U.S. Naipaul, Michael Anthony, Walcott, Derek Walcott, who else? A lot of different people. I'm not sure who. And then there's Mona James Cunningham, mean, these things were always around in terms of oral tradition, like we have what they call an Nancy stories, which is based on a West African folklore here as a tracer. Called a Nancy. It's from the Ashanti originally, but because there's, it was more to the Caribbean. There's an expression in Trinidad where you say Nancy like Shango, so it's really part of the culture. And Caribbean culture is distinct from North American Black culture and from African culture. We do not call ourselves African anything. We call ourselves Caribbean people. And for people like me who actually have indigenous ancestry in them, to deny part of our ancestry roots, not really a thing. But I got into this because I found it a lot more stimulating, challenging, and accomplished in terms of what you need to do in terms of your writing craft than just pulling the treasure. I don't read nonfiction, I read a lot of fiction. I've always written since I was a young person, like a little child. So I don't come from a background where I've been deprived of seeing myself in the future or in my present or in the positions of power. This is still new territory. There have been cases where, like for example, I started. It's not exactly saying that it was the first time, but it's a first of sorts where people started writing complete patois, which is basically English Creole from the Caribbean. And I started doing that around 2015 with Celeste today, but she's now a trying to graduate, and she Nigerian influences Nigerian versions of some films. And she's gone on to publish stuff in Strange Horizons, and now both published stuff in complete patois in Strange Horizons. So trying to break down the sort of monotony and measuring of just Eurocentrism. I'm glad to just let that go to the wayside and have a little bit more and have a lot more inclusive stories going.
So my name is Kelvin Nyeusi Mawazo. I forget the original question. You wanted us to talk about our work?
Yeah, your work and how you got into it.
Okay. I'm a graphic novelist, so these are my 5 books here. Black Sun Comics, The Longest Night. Actually, I'll explain more about this afterwards. I'll tell you a bit about how I came into Afrofuturism. Actually, I didn't know that I was doing Afrofuturism until after I'd actually written my stuff. I was just calling it black sci-fi. And to your point, being a weird kid, I can completely relate with that. My first introduction to science fiction was when I was 5 years old, watching, I don't know if anyone remembers, Vanguard Ace, Star Blazers, Japanese anime. Okay, I see it. That's like, you know what I'm talking about. So that old 1970s, Japan anime type stuff is what I was just fascinated by. And then Star Trek. I've seen almost everything, all the Alien movies, just Dune, whatever, like I've seen it all. So that was my first introduction to science fiction. But then as I was watching it and consuming comic books and all that kind of stuff, I noticed there was a lack of black characters, authentic black characters that were treated well. Like, there's the popular stereotype of the black guy always dies in the sci-fi movie. And I was like, I'm not with that. So this is a story that I've had kicking around in my head for about the past 10 years. And I just at one point decided I'm not getting any younger, may as well just do it. So yeah, that was my introduction into it. And then after I started publishing it online, from just doing Google searches, I found out there's this term called Afrofuturism. That sounds kind of cool. What's that all about? And there was a writer, Balogun Ojitade, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who I found who had written a lot about Afrofuturism. And I'm like, okay, this kind of works. I guess what I'm doing kind of fits into this. And then as I got into that, I discovered there's this whole community of Afrofuturists all over the world. I was like, okay, this is awesome. And it was actually soon after that Quentin had contacted me about the Black Speculative Arts Movement. So everything's just kind of fit and came together. Yeah, I think I answered the question. Cool.
Actually, talk more.
Oh. Yeah, so Black Sun Longest Night is about a peaceful planet in an alternate universe that one day gets attacked by these creatures that you see here, these zombie-like monsters. They appear virtually out of nowhere and start destroying everything in their path. No one knows who or what they are, no one knows where they come from, but most importantly, no one knows how to stop them. So it's about this group of unlikely heroes that you see pictured here that kind of have to learn to work together, figure things out, and hopefully save the day, maybe. So as you read each chapter, you find out more, get to see what happens. It's 5 books now. It'll be 7 when it's done. I'm working on book number 6, and then 7 will be the completion of this first saga, and then there's another saga that I'll be doing after that. Yeah.
So, a lot of y'all are pioneers and trailblazers in your field of writing and creation, content creation. And a lot of speculative fiction and Afrofuturism is about the next generation. And I want to know, and you can riff off each other or agree or disagree. This is a safe space, I believe, corona-free. And I would like to know, hopefully, but the whole rumor, black people are unaffected. Anyways, so I'm interested to know if you were mentored in the work that you do, and if you provide mentorship, because in a lot of ways, Afrofuturism is in itself, or speculative fiction is in itself, a form of mentorship for the next generation, right? Because we're thinking about beyond the present, and people can take a lot from our own personal work. For me, I took a lot from Octavia Butler's work, and I felt like she was like a mother to me through her writing, especially the Kelvin Sword. And so I'm interested to know if y'all were mentorship, if y'all were mentored as writers, and if you provide mentorship.
So in terms of direct mentorship, where you sort of work directly with people, I think that I have, yes and no is the answer to that. The first person I ever read doing what I think of what I'm doing now was Nadia Carful. And that was reading her Zara the Windseeker. And that must have been mid-2000s, I think. And this was right after I'd come out of grad school, because I had this sort of crisis of, I had a quarter life crisis at 25 where I was like, oh God, what do I do? And I wanted to write, but I knew that I didn't want to write the kind of literary fiction that I saw in the bookstores. I didn't want to be the next Chinelo Achebe. As wonderful as Flora Mapa is, I did not want to be her. I wanted to do something different, and I'd been writing, speculative fiction on my own since I was 13, basically fan fiction in a lot of ways, and creating these secondary worlds for myself. And the first time I actually saw someone publish something that was drawing from a background that I recognized, that was drawing from traditions that were my own, was me, and it just kind of changed the game for me. I started publishing in 2012, and that was a conscious decision because that was something I wanted to do. It's also when I actually, funny enough, discovered Octavia Butler, Mayla Hopkinson, who also destroyed me emotionally with some of her books, and just women who were writing in their tradition that I recognized, but in worlds that were so beautiful and distinct and different. And it really changed the game for me. But I think that, I would say that I have been mentored because I have been in some ways mentored by these books, by their work. I've also enrolled in a lot of different programs where editors and writers looked at my work and gave me feedback that I thought was really important for my own growth. I've also tried to sort of send that back into the world. So when in 2014, I was given the chance to go to Clarion West, which is a writer's workshop for speculative fiction. It's 6 weeks. It's the most intensive thing you will ever do with your life. And it drove me pretty close to madness. But when I came out of it, I had a very crystal clear idea of what I wanted to write and what I wanted to say, and that's been incredibly important going forward. So right after that, I came out of it, and a friend of mine who had been talking about creating a magazine for years, finally decided he was going to do it. And when he asked me to come on board, I jumped on board. And so I spent the next 4 years being an editor for this online magazine. We were some of the first people to publish some of the names that are coming out right now, like Suyu Davis Okomba. He got his first short story in our magazine, which I used to have no idea. And there's been a whole generation of African speculative fiction writers who got their first start in Omenana, and I think that's probably the most proud thing that I've done with my career. Sometimes I lie awake thinking, oh God, I haven't written a book, what am I going to do? But then I think about giving back in that way, in terms of being able to edit and nurture. And I think editing, good editorial advice, sincere editorial advice is some of the best nurturing and mentorship you can actually get. So when you send out something into the world and it comes back with all these 10,000 comments and it makes you feel like you're the worst writer in the world, that is actually the most valuable thing anyone can do for you, is to give you their frank editorial knowledge. And that's been my goal for me. I remember having a conversation with a lady on Facebook about whether I should get a PhD or not. She said yes, I decided not to, but that's beside the point. The point being that giving your time to writers who are coming up, even if you don't sit down, and mentor them one-on-one, can be so invaluable for people who are just starting out, people who are still looking for their voices. And so, yeah, I have been mentored, but no, I haven't had anyone sort of take me under their wing directly and say, this is how you do the thing you're going to do.
In terms of mentoring anybody, I have not. However, I help run, I am the second in command basically of Abyss and Apex magazine, which is not the same as Apex magazine, which is completely different. Just to show that. We have a long-standing reputation of finding and nurturing talent. People like Norothy Johnson, Alia Dibadar, Labi Tidar, Rati Malhotra, Calder, he's been nominated for a pushcart. So many people. Tony Pai was somebody who we published, and Wendy, my friend, and she's a publisher, and she had edited his story and was nominated for Aurora back in 2008. And ever since she took over, this reputation for finding and nurturing new talent. So if I find somebody who's not sure about something of getting published, send it to us and what can you use. And it tends to, for example, Sylvester Baker, I mentioned before, she's just gone to Houston. Wendy Delmater, who's, like I said, is a publisher of this name, but she mentors me in terms of giving me knowledge as to the writing craft and showing all the basics. And it'll be 7 years in November, and I still think I have a lot to learn. I am a better writer than I'm an editor, and she's a better editor than I'm a writer, so we kind of complement each other that way. So yeah.
So have I been mentored? Sort of. I think not I think. My grade 11 English teacher taught me a lot about writing. I remember something he said was that everything in a story is relevant. And at the time, I don't know, how old are you in grade 11? 16? Something like that. That was just mind-blowing to me. Everything that I read and watched after that just kind of made sense. It's like, oh, okay, that's why they put that in here, because it's foreshadowing to this that's going to happen later on. So that always stuck with me. I've always had indirect mentors in regards to just stuff that I like. I always take hints and cues from that and try and flip it and work and make it work for what I do. In regards to do I mentor myself? Yes, not indirectly. I have a YouTube channel that tells you how I do what I do, because I illustrate the comics, but the illustration is done digitally. I don't draw it. I use a mixture of digital painting and 3D software in order to do it. So I have a YouTube channel that explains how I do that. So people leave comments and say, oh, you're like an invisible mentor to me. So yeah, I mentor in that sense. And funny that you should ask, because I'm going to be teaching a comics class come April, May. I'm still deciding when to do it, still working out those details. So, and that will be for kids ages 9 to about 14. Then I'm going to do another one for adults. So that's what I'm looking to do in the near future as well. So mentorship is important because none of us are here forever. And I figure what I've gained, I may as well pass on to someone else. So when I'm gone, at least someone else can continue that stuff. So, yeah.
So, just while the mic's over there.
Yep.
I think I'm pretty loud. Everyone can hear me? So, like, how do we create more writers, especially from a Canadian standpoint? Like, there's such a small number of us who are being championed within the larger canon. And so, I would like to know, like, how do you think we can create more Black Canadian content out there within the speculative fiction and science fiction?
I believe in funding it yourself and not asking for permission. That's how I did this. I saved up my own money and did it. And then when I do events, especially the kids see it and they're just flabbergasted. And I know there's someone out there right now, like a small Black child, who's reading this and wants to do it themselves. So it's about being out there and showing excellence. Right? It's not just whipping something together and putting it out there, but actually putting time and thought and effort into it. And then when people see that, they get inspired. Right? So that's always been my secondary goal